Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh of Inner Skill, and today I have Veronique Ory with me. Veronique, what's going on with you today?
Living so wildly and free, and so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, who is Veronique and what kind of work does she do?
Mm. Veronique is uh, a woman of probably multiple time frames, namely the 50s and the 20s, and probably generations of many timelines. I have been told that I was a dancer in many lifetimes, and I come from a line of storytellers. My grandfather from Hungary was a phenomenal storyteller, a linguist. He spoke five languages and immigrated to Montreal when my dad was 10. And he was really adept at capturing the story that he wanted to tell, whether we were checking out at the grocery store or sitting next to a stranger at the movie theaters. And I just really loved the energy of bringing people together and sharing uh, a sliver of life and letting there be laughter and tears and the whole spectrum of emotions and seeing how people connected to the the narrative and how very much we see ourselves in the heroine or the hero or sometimes the villain and and how that's really the origin of how we gathered as humans around the fire and connected in probably one of the most simplest and profound ways. And so that was the kernel that led me to go to theater school and started my own nonprofit theater company in LA when I was 22 and rounded the bend to New York City and felt like I could do anything because it's a pretty harsh place to live. And really at the core of it, it has always been about how do we gather to have thought-provoking experiences where we can shed the things that are weighty. And a lot of that can be from the crazy families that a lot of us come from to just social interactions and just living in the world, right? There's that old adage, if you're not anxious and depressed, you're not paying attention. There's a lot to be upset about. But I aim to lead with joy and wanting to be in relationships and conversations where we elevate one another. And that was very much what led me into the yoga practice and wanting to really awaken to how we can be really clear on what's actually happening. And so I often say, like, can we just be our own ophthalmologist and turn the lens to how we wish to see the world or how we wish to see this person or how we wish to be interacting in this conversation or this moment and how that can really directly influence the way that we are in the energetic space and in the physical space and ultimately how we vibrate and are in this frequency that can be that beautiful ripple effect of how our lives can be that that what I love to say is that shine that we can share with one another, like through the heartache and all the things that try to convince us that there's there's a lot to be upset about, and certainly that exists as well simultaneously. But through that, I went through a yoga teacher training and was really compelled to share what had been so transformative in my life personally. And a lot of us walk around with so much stress and anxiety, and we're kind of like in the marathon of it. So we're like in pace and not fully cognizant of the impact. And it's usually when we're forced to slow down by global pandemic or an illness or an injury where we can start to really witness how that can play a role. And so my hope is that we can connect in a way that we can find rest on purpose, where we can live a life by design rather than by default.
That's beautiful. And one of the biggest things that resonated with what you said was this right view that you talk. I mean, in the Buddhist teachings, um, it's pretty much everything. It's where the path starts and ends, and just reminded of we can't really control a lot of things sometimes that happen to us, but we can't control. I mean, we seem to have a say, at least in how we view it, right? And
Hmm.
then there's wiser views than other views, and there's views that are going to be for our benefit and long term happiness and welfare, and that of others, and other views that will just keep leading on to delusion and anger and greed and stuff like this that aren't going to be that so helpful. Yeah, and that training of the mind, that helps with a wise view, a skillful view, and it can be our greatest ally. And if we don't train it, then it can be our worst enemy. So I want to do something unconventional here before we get into some of the other things you mentioned. Is could you tell me a story that your grandfather told you? Um,
Oh,
do you
yeah.
remember any? Yeah, I would have figured if you're in theater, you might remember one of these.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is an old Arsenal. He passed away. Oh gosh, probably 20 years ago by now. Um,
sorry.
thank you. He this is actually really remarkable. So my grandparents on my father's side were survivors of the Holocaust, and they would talk about stories of how their family moved through that and the way that they knew how to move through that. And I don't have a strong imprint on narrative, but I have a very strong impact on the and what's so wild about this is like what psychologists talk about as a way to like move through trauma. And I feel like my grandparents just did this naturally. Like they stated things as fact without emotion. So there was never like a victim story. It was never like, I'm telling you this like hardship that we had to go through. It was like, this happened and this happened and this happened. And we're so grateful that we're here. They came on a boat with the clothes on their back when my dad was only 10 for a promise of a better life. Um, One story I remember, so my grandfather owned a vineyard, and in those days, like that meant like you were rich. And my grandmother was very poor. And when my grandfather was courting her, he kept showing up on his motorcycle, and it was like very fancy. And this is, when he was 18 and she was 16, and she would light up, like, I can't believe he's interested in me. And my grandmother's mother said to my grandfather, "What are your intentions with my daughter?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. I like her and I just want to keep showing up." And she says, "Don't come back here until you can tell me what your intentions are." And then my grandfather went away, and my grandmother was just like, "Why would you say that? He's never going to come back here." And then a couple days later, he came back and he said, "I want to marry her." And yeah, they lived a long life together. They were soulmates, and they just, I think, were like the epitome of just love story, where their eyes lit up when they saw one another. And even hearing that story so many times, it was like, you're just transported there.
Do you think that world will ever come again? That type of world? You know what I mean?
Mm.
As like
Oh,
we're just so far, it feels from that, you know? Like the world we live in now, it just seems, yeah, so far away from that. Not that we,
hmm.
not, I mean, that question really has no point, right? But
It
it's
does
just,
though.
well, yeah.
Well, I think like in a certain way, right? Like I really believe the podcasts are the modern radio show, right? Where we can just listen in and be, you know, voyeurs, so to speak, on this conversation. And my hope is that there's this returning to using the technology as a means of deeper connection versus to distract. And I think the connection to meeting organically, to have courtship, to have the dynamic of allowing there to be space. Like I do feel like that's coming back because we've been in such almost like a cyclone of like faster, more, better, of you know, of course, like all the dating apps and like these things that have been created of like, oh, like here is every person in the world that you could possibly connect with. And I do find that it's so romantic that you continue to show up to the places where your heart lights up. And of course, your soulmate's going to be there. That's just fate, you know. You might meet them on an app, but I love the story of, you know, someone showing up on a motorcycle at your door and saying, I'm gonna marry her. Like that, I mean, who doesn't
Great.
swoon over that?
I mean, yeah, you're definitely dialed into the romantic element, and that is I mean, the most pervasive theme in that story. What's striking me, and you know, you really make a really intriguing point here about connection and space. However, I'm talking to a computer, literally. I mean, I'm talking to you virtually, right? So,
Yeah.
however, you know, it makes this more possible. It's not like I'm probably going to just, you know, this pod matching service, right, to find guests and hosts. You know, if maybe it will happen where people have the resources to just go in person to do the interview. But, you know, with our busy lives and everything involved in that, you know, that would be
Hmm.
like in the rate of life now, how fast it is, you know, I mean,
Yes.
let's say, and there's a really big podcast now where they fly the guest in, you know, person to person, but
Yeah.
this is a convenience. And so it's kind of a little bit of a mind F to me in a way, you know.
Yeah.
But it is also really great because who would have thought that we could talk to people all over the world almost instantaneously and have really meaningful, in depth conversations. But the other thing that popped out of this story for me is like ethics, you know? To me, that's really endearing and upright. Like, and then he went and reflected, right? He had some like soul searching and really, you know, was forced to do what he did. And I think that
Hmm.
is really honorable and upright and you know. So yeah, what a wonderful story. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. So yeah, how do you think maybe some of the themes in that and maybe some other things your grandparents told you about fit into what you're doing today, the work in yoga you're doing today, maybe?
Yeah, I think a lot that has come through, and this has certainly been talked widely about in the spiritual and wellness space of this intergenerational trauma. It's it's very easy to lean into feeling like, oh, and this is a big movement, like I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, like all of that stuff. I mean, I probably see like a meme about that every single day. And what's so wild about that is the notion that we're not. It's like we're all born worthy. Like we wouldn't have been born if we're not worthy of this life. And to come from survivors, like just the notion of that is we are resilient. We have so much fortitude. We have so much strength, and we have protection all around us that actually ensure that we would be born in this time, like with all the technology. Like sometimes just a couple days ago, my father was in town actually, and we were watching this old clip from Swing Time of just like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and just like so classy. And I just like, like I would dream to be alive during that time. And also, I'm so grateful that we're able to connect in this way. And I like try to like presence you in my space as much as possible. Like I have like all the elements around, and like feel like if we're going to use this technology, like let's also, you know, feel like we're in the same space. And for everyone who's listening, it's like, yeah, we're just like all in the same room together, and we're collapsing time and space to feel like we are in the ways that we know how to. And so I think allowing for the strength to shine through, and that's, an echo of what I was talking about earlier of like, okay, we could, and you see this also too in families that have multiple kids, how like child one tends to be like the optimist and child two is like struggling, usually, of, like addiction tends to come through. There's like a lot of like rebellion that comes through, and everyone's like, wait, you had the same parents, you went to the same school, like what's going on here? And it's like a lot of it is just subconscious stuff, things that you inherited through the generations, like things that come through the pike that like is like your like karmic like thing to metabolize somehow. And we all are metabolizing at different rates, and just like trying to figure this life school out, you know?
Yeah.
But I do really love that for the lessons that my grandparents taught me, and my parents did as well in their own way, of just really really leaning into like what is empowering. So it's like you could walk into a room and be really intimidated by the people who are very successful and strong and have this aptitude for physical things that you think are impressive or whatever the case may be. But the very notion that you're in the room with people who are strong and you admire all these qualities, it means that it's close to you. And so rather than being intimidated, finding, oh, this is actually really inspirational, and how wonderful that I'm able to be a witness to this. And so then when that vibrates through, it's like, oh, like, who says that I can't do that? Who says that I'm not worthy of this greatness that I'm seeing in this person? It's actually very much a part of who I am and who they are, and, you know, the uniqueness in each of us, that we all have something so beautiful to be, of service with and for, that I just I just really love that in terms of an orientation, and that's really informed how I guide, of like it might start with what are you physically craving, but oftentimes it's so interwoven of an energetic craving. And so that is guided physically, but it's so intertwined with a person's spiritual path. And And it's so wild, like whatever is top of mind, like the thing that feels weighty in the moment, we like move through the physical practice. And what's so beautiful is by the end, nothing has changed and everything has changed, right? Like the entire physiology is just like different person, different energetic. And it's like if we can just remember and remember that, then we realize, oh, right, like we're so much more powerful than we realize.
Totally. This is a huge thing, and I think I see with the feminine even more is this notion of worthiness. It's a tough one. I think men struggle with honor and respect more so.
Mm,
Just
mm-hmm.
as a general cliche, and I do have some spiritual cliches here, but they've helped me around things like this. The turning point for me, I think, was when or one of the turning points was what other people think about me is none of my business in a way too, right? And then when I got intimidated around, maybe being out of my league or, people with impressive physical things. You said that's a really interesting one back when I was still in the corporate world. And a few things with that. I mean, well, one, the jealousy, and there's, I heard a teacher say that that's just a preview of the good things coming your way. And I was like, what? No, that can't be. So it's really interesting to like turn the tables and just, okay, well, I'd be open to seeing what that's like.
Yeah.
Another perception I think is when I'm just being judgmental or something instead of not judgmental, but like, oh, I shouldn't be judging, right? Um, then instead of if I'm even concerned about that, then I don't think it's being judgmental at all. It's only judgmental if I feel better about myself for saying, oh, this so and so, they're that and that. Then I feel better about myself. That's judgmental. But what if it's just a recognition that that's not for me right now, What if that's
Mm-hmm.
not for me? I mean, I can see and honor and respect that and respect like their kind of divine nature or Buddha nature or whatever. And it's just not for me right now. It's not saying
Mm-hmm.
it's, but I think with the worthiness though, so we usually think of conceit, right, as I'm better than them, right? That we all recognize as conceit, right? I'm so good that they suck, right? But there's also inferiority conceit, right? And I think that's a lot of, and especially in our Western culture, when we're just, and especially women in general. Oh my gosh, the beauty industry and what they're comparing themselves, and comparison conceit too, right? Instead of comparing ourselves to ourselves and how well we've done, we're always stacking ourselves up against some ideal or some other role models, which there's really not a lot of good role models. I wish there were more. There are some, right? And I don't want to be negative Nancy here or negative Ned. It's just, there's a lot of stuff going on that women have, they comparing themselves to, beating themselves up over, always taking care of everybody else before themselves, usually. I mean, these are not absolutes, but we see this run ragged and not, yeah. So yeah. And then one last thing I want to say about this is what if we didn't have to be, do, or say anything to and use your to shine, to be here, to anchor light. And yeah, so that's the ground kind of start from, and then it just goes up from there, right? So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but this work, and I just see like people, oh, that's a nice idea, but it's not really like that, right? They're, oh, that's great, but I'm crap. I'm not good enough, and stuff like that. There's just not, I don't know what it is, like a doubt, like a doubting, or yeah, the perception is really strong. So in another way, thing I like is aspirations too. But instead of affirmations are okay, right? But a lot of times they're lying to ourselves, saying I'm this, I'm that, when I'm not. So the alternative I say is, okay, this is where I want to aspire to. This is my aspiration. I'm here now,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
lying to myself and kidding myself. And I'm going to make an effort and open up to going towards that aspiration, make a resolution towards going
Mhm.
to the aspiration. So there's just some things that come up, and I
Mhm.
think being kind to it, the really tough one is for me is being happy for other people's happiness. That is an antidote to jealousy too, right?
Mhm.
It's so easy for me to say, oh, why don't I have that? I want that or this and that. But if I can be happy for their happiness, then I'm happy too. And so, like vicarious joy, it's a beautiful thing, rejoicing. It's a wonderful form of happiness.
Mhm.
Yeah, what's coming through is so one of the sort of yoga practices off the mat in terms of social media that I recommend is um, when there's a post that is triggering, you can mute that person, you can unfollow them, they don't need to know. When someone is celebrating something and it's authentic, I think that you're happy for them. When someone is boasting about something, or they're like constantly like in this like presentational form, it's it's grating, it's off-putting. And it's part of that is like our perception, right? Like this sort of insert of how we perceive the person. But I think if you're attuned to how you're seeing the world, I think like you're a pretty you're pretty apt to know the difference. And so I think that that's really important. And then in terms of like the baseline response to these things, I really recommend the like no phone until you've centered. So back in New York days, I had my phone by my bed. I would use it as an alarm like many people do, and then I would just turn my alarm off and then I'm like, "Oh, well, let me just check my messages real quick." And then I could spend like up to an hour just like pinballing around into that world. And what I started to do in this recent chapter over the last coming up on 5 years now is I don't have my phone anywhere near my head when I sleep. I really take care to get outside, walk, be still, move, do these things. And it's like not until do I feel like hand to the heart, like I'm good, I'm like ready. I'll even take like an extra beat, like, do I want to open up the portal to what other people may have to say right now? And then when it feels like it's time, then I'll open up that portal. But I think from that space, the judgment, the expectation, the comparison, all of that stuff, it doesn't have a space when we're connected to source, when we're feeling like our nervous system is regulated, when we feel like we've tended to ourselves in a holistic way. And that routine, can look different for each person. Certainly for me, I love to have a 3 hour runway with that. It could be an hour if I'm teaching early. However, I find, to have that amount of space to like really witness the sun come up and just get intoxicated by watching how the sun comes through the trees. It's just like, oh, okay, like actually nothing needs to happen. I could just be here and be still, and that would be enough. And so that's like the practice of gratitude. That's not like, oh, I'm like listing the people and I'm like, being like very systematic about it, but it's just like a full sensory knowing of like yes, I have goals, like yes, I aspire to greatness in so many ways. That's like wanting to feel expansive and forever growing and all of these things, and I wish that for all of us. And also everything is beautiful just as it is right here and now. And um I say with my retreat partner every time we get on like a little puddle jumper plane and it like feels really unstable, I'll say to her, because I know she's really fearful of flying, I'll say, I could die right now and I'd be so happy. I don't want to, just to be clear. But but I also feel so
You
grateful
don't have
for
a death wish. Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, yes. Well, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're all gonna have to die. That's right.
I said, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be today, but I also feel very at peace if it should
That's
be,
right.
if it should be now. And the other piece that I thought coming through when you're talking about the aspirations is I really think about the energetics around what that aspiration holds. So it's like if you have the aspiration for, a certain job or like a certain relationship or, you know, having a a certain item that feels like the pinnacle of success for you. Um, I think about, okay, like how would I feel if I had that? And I do like a little visualization. And usually what it comes down to is I would feel free, or I would feel like I've left a legacy, or I would feel empowered, right? And so tapping into that is possible without that thing actually happening. And what happens is then we get to practice non-attachment. So it's like, oh, I aspire to this, and also I feel this here and now. And so like this could happen in a timeline that I don't know. It could be tomorrow, it could be 10 years from now, or perhaps there's actually something greater and more magical that's been circling. And if I attach to that thing, then I'm blocking the magnificence that is waiting to show up. And
To-
so, yeah, so that's a really beautiful way to be in the meditation with that.
that is really, yeah, well put. And plus, it helps. A lot of times, the things we aspire to, our want or goals, um, we just want the feeling that they're going to give us, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so if we just tune into that, like you're saying, yeah, we kind of get the end result right away, almost. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, because I think that's it's a primary driving point for whatever goal or achievement we want to get or aspire to. Not everything. I mean, like if you want to realize full awakening, right? Well, that's going to have to be realized, not just felt, or whatever, right? But it also helps, I think, attract it quicker. And in like you're saying, not being attached to a specific outcome, because what did the Tibetans say? Like, great, many expectations, many disappointments, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, even at best, when we get it, then it's satisfying for like how long, and then it's the next thing and the next thing, and that it just really never ends. And
Yeah.
so,
That's
at
that's
best,
that
yeah.
that's the buy now culture. Yeah. So I actually I was feeling that this morning. Funny thing, when my dad and stepmom were in town, my stepmom didn't pack sneakers and we were heading to play table tennis. And so I loaned her a pair of sneakers and she's like, these are great, I'll take them. And I was like, what? So she left with the sneakers. Like she like put
Oh,
them in her suitcase.
she wasn't familiar with the term borrowing, what that means,
No,
or
it
lending.
was
Yeah.
it was I was speechless. I wasn't expecting her to just take them. And I quite liked those sneakers. They were gold and they could transfer to, going for a walk or like put on a skirt and
Maybe she'll hear this podcast and things will change.
so anyway, so I found myself this morning looking for the replacement, right? And I spent quite a bit of time like researching, like, okay, do I want to get exactly this pair? Do I want to get something different? Maybe I'll like look at the sneakers that I have and I can just clean slate, get something like one sneaker that would cover the bases for all of these purposes. And then I just, it was like an emotional allergic reaction. I was like, I am not buying anything. Like the move is less, the move is please take it. I I honestly, you know what I mean? It's like I have what, like three other pairs that I can choose from. It's not necessary. And so I think it's so important as part of my meditation practice. I I purge one item a day. Which when I tell my mother this, she's like, now how are you still, getting rid of things? Some days it's like, oh, I'm like using this tea, or, I I was like emptying a wallet and I had like five Metro cards. I'm like, okay, like, we're not using these anymore. So there's like, things that kind of like hide in the recesses. I challenge everyone listening. One item a day. And so that's like 29 items in a lunar cycle. And then what I love to do is like every new moon, I'll either, gift the things to like the different people that I thought of, or I'll like donate them to there's like a women's refuge for clothes, or like different, centers, because that is long lasting. Like in the giving is the receiving. This is like what I always talk about, is what I think of as like Lakshmi energy, where like it's like waterfall, and the giving is the receiving. And sure, I could very easily like add to cart. It would be at my door tomorrow, and probably in the closet they would go until, the occasion. I mean, like I'm mostly in flip-flops is like also like the hysterical thing about it, like or barefoot. I'm mostly barefoot, honestly, unless I'm leaving the house. So, but I think it's such an important point, because this is the difference of contentedness and happiness, right? These things that almost scratch the itch, and we're all addictive beings just by the very nature of how our brains are wired. And so it's like, what do we want to be addicted to? And so, like, is this the thought that we want to have? Like, is this the thing we want to purchase? Is this the thing we want to consume, either, through like drink or food, or like the media, or whatever the thing is? And the other piece that was coming through is just remembering Buddha's law is like, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And just like pass everything through that. And basically, we would probably not speak or do anything.
There are a lot of noble silent retreats for sure. You know, generosity is a huge one. I'm going to come to that in a second. As triggering, though, you mentioned it on social media, and I will say, unless I have something where I need an alarm clock, my phone is off. My electronics are off at night, away. But that reminds me, there's another alarm clock that I can use instead of my phone. So thank you for reminding me, because I was in a quandary about that, and I just realized I don't have to do that anymore. So yeah, it's a really good practice to get into. Did a Zen retreat where we turned in electronics for an entire month. I had no idea how much of my sanity was tied to electronics. It was a real eye opener. I don't think I've done that since the start of the internet, probably. It was wild. So but
Yeah,
not doing really intense practice too. But that's for maybe another time. This triggering, though. So yeah, I don't think that this doesn't apply if I wake up and I grab my phone and then I get triggered out. That's different, because I mean, no one, everybody's going to do that. We need this kind of container before we can be mindfully present to some. But when something catches us off guard, I mean, if I may, with your trigger, I know when I get triggered, I welcome it in a way, because it shows me what work I kind of still have left to do. But
that's right.
yeah, I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but what I'm seeing here is you didn't see seen or heard or met or considered with what she did, right? Like it was misinterpreted. I guess she misinterpreted. She didn't pay enough attention to you really to see your reactions on how it was. or what you meant in the situation, or how, like she wasn't reading you properly, like, or respecting I mean, in a way, it's not theft. I mean, I would say that there was just it's something was going on there where yeah, it's so I don't know, these things they're not pleasant, but they are rich for spiritual activity. And I love how you dealt with it the way you did and turned it into an opportunity for generosity, and that's the
Hmm.
first thing the Buddha would teach everyone before anything else, is generosity. How does it feel, before I give, when I'm considering giving a gift, right? And then when I'm giving a gift, and then afterwards. And so, yeah, when we allow it and do this practice, we're the one that's benefiting the most from it. A lot of times, it's really, when they say all else fails, give a gift too. So it's such a beautiful practice, and it shifts from greed, from what can I get out of this, to what can I give. So it's yeah, I can't really be praised enough. And the intentionality behind it is really important as well, why we're giving. And yeah, so it's a really good yeah, I can't say enough good things about generosity, for sure. So
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
I think I don't know when people will be listening to this, but I think it's apt around the holidays, but really it's applicable all the time because I feel like there's always like a holiday on the horizon where it's like, okay, I have to get this gift, or like there's an event where there's food and it's like, okay, let me like contribute something to this. And I don't want to show up empty-handed and, all of these things. And so what I've tended to do, which, I'd be curious to hear, what your thoughts are, is I'll go into my pantry and I'll just create a dessert from things that I already have. And I'll just channel my grandmother, who was a phenomenal baker, and I'll just kind of sample different ingredients together of flavors that I think the the person hosting would enjoy, and do that instead of, a bottle of wine, or, buying something else. Because it'd be so easy, like, oh, let me just look up this recipe. And then it's like, oh, of course, now I have to buy like these additional items, or, oh, let me like get a gift bag for the bottle of the wine, all these things. It's like, oh, can we just actually make something that is delicious and of real ingredients, that is made of items that I already have.
No, it's great. It shows the sign of a really good cook too, that they can make something taste delicious, with whatever they have, right? They can come up with something no matter what's there. That's the sign of a really good cook too. And that's it's so much more, I think, heartwarming, and there's so much good energy that can come into to cooking. I mean, it was one of my huge self-care practices during lockdown, and I still really enjoy cooking, and it's great, and it's so much more fun to cook for others. So yeah, it's really praiseworthy, I feel. And it's a really special thing, as well. Now, I will say that the flip side, if there's some people that are run too ragged, and they have all these high expectations, oh, I have to do all this for so many people, and yeah, when am I ever going to get this done, and stressing out about it, then maybe
Hmm.
it could be the opposite. Like, okay, maybe you should ask somebody to help, or you should just go and buy some stuff so you don't have to do so much stuff, right? So
Yeah.
it really depends what the person is, I think, and the situation is. What's going to be the long-term welfare and happiness, or even, yeah, short-term in such instance like this, for the
That's
person doing it and for everybody involved. So yeah, it depends on who the person is in the situation. I think it's a lovely act, of kindness and love for what you're doing, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such an important part of the conversation of really looking at, like, where are the energy leaks, where are the money leaks, and it's like, what do I love to do and that I'm really great at? and how can I delegate the other things? And I've dialed up things depending on what's going on in my life. And it's so wild. Like, an example is like when I moved into this home, I thought, oh, okay, like let me hire someone to come clean once a week, and then I don't have to worry about that. And that felt liberating for that time. And then it was like a switch where I was like, I'm going to claim this back, and I'm going to like put that money in this other column, and I'm gonna regard it as a meditation. So it was like every Thursday it'll be like in rotation. So I'm not spending an entire day doing it, but I'll turn on like high vibe music, and it'll be like 20 minutes, go, vacuum the whole house. And it's like almost like a workout. And so that feels very liberating. And then, like there was a time where I loved to go and get my hair done, and I have a lot of hair, so it would take like 3 hours. And I'm like, I'm friends with my stylist and we would have a good time, but I'm like, this is a really long sit. And so like 6 months ago, I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I had gotten a pair of shears during COVID, and I was like, I'm just cutting my own hair like a bonsai tree, and they're curls, and so they're forgiving. And so like that feels very liberating, right? So I don't know, I just invite everyone to think about, what are the things that actually are giving to you and to others? Like, where are the ways that, like, and this is like what I was talking about earlier. It's like, what are the things that we're doing by default? It's like, oh, well, I always go and do this, or like, this person like always expects me to like make this thing, or, so it's like, okay, but do I want to choose to do that today? And like how does that resonate? And usually what I think of is like, okay, do I feel like ice with this, meaning like is there constriction, or do I feel like steam with this? Does it feel expansive? And usually it's like one or the other, right? Like it's either a hell yes or a hell no. And like let's just like lean into the things that like really are a full body yes. And I mean, if we just turn the dial that way, oh my gosh, what would we do with this amazing life that we have?
It's a really good gauge. Yeah. Is this giving me energy or is it draining energy, right? That's I
That's
think
right.
another really good gauge. Yeah, and what and then when we come up against hardship, like one of the things I like is what weakness is this helping me strengthen?
Hmm.
So turning it into kind of an opportunity as well. So yeah, these are all such beautiful approaches to, and this is where the life really happens in like the everyday things like this, and where a lot of the spiritual lessons come to, and actually a lot of the mystical stuff is, it can't be really separated out from the mundane as well, right? And all these practices, these views, these responses, how we hold them, it's trains the heart. It's yeah, it's what it's about. And I think not to make too much of it, and also not to overlook it either. This kind of dance of life that we're in. I know I'm speaking just kind of metaphorically here and in general, but I mean, that's yeah, I think this what you shared today was quite lovely all around, and I really appreciate you have amazing, lovely energy, and this kind of, yeah, it's such a brightness and support. And you talked about empowerment. I think it's so important that we encourage and empower each other, and do it authentically too, not trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, and not like disavowing struggle either, but like what is really needed and what's skillful, like moment to moment even, and then what is even more universal that crosses kind of times and places and eras even. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, the French version of Veronica, thank you so much for. We talked a little bit before the show how to pronounce her name, and I've been notoriously bad at pronouncing names sometimes, so I'm just going to say that. Tell people how they can get in touch with you tell people how they say your name properly, what kind of offerings you have, how people can work with you, what you have
Hmm.
kind of in the pipeline in the works. And if there's a message you'd like to leave everybody with, please do so.
Thank you. Thank you for that. My my full name is Veronique Ory, and yeah, just to expand on that a little bit. So I was named after a Veronica. It was a childhood friend of my mom's, and she wanted the French version of it, and the meaning of it is true image. And I just really love that because I feel like I have that, and we all have that, right? Because we're all mirrors for one another. And so I really embody that as a way of being, and then also in the way that I guide and in my relationships. And I would so love to connect with everyone. One of my favorite parts of being able to have these conversations and being in this life school together, why not connect in a way that feels resonant? You can find out about me at my website, yogawithveronique.com. I'm on Instagram at Veronique Ory, and my offerings are a membership platform. So I wrote a book called Shine on and Off the Mat, and it's available on Amazon and BookBaby. And if you're interested in a self-inquiry journey, it's a coffee table style book that is a weekly themed practice that is timely and timeless. So themes like let go, slowing down, reflection. I have a series through the chakras and different mudras, and there's little stories, some of which you'll see sprinkled in, of my foray in theater and about my grandparents and my parents, and it's told in a universal way. Like, we talked about at the beginning of, like, we will naturally see ourselves in these different instances. And so the idea is that we give the mind a meal to chew on in the meditation, in the vinyasa practice, and in the yin practice. So there's a three-part series. Each of the practices are just 20 minutes because it's said to be the perfect amount of time to change the physiology. If you feel like you don't have time for it, please call me. I will be happy to look at your calendar with you and carve this space out because it's so necessary. And I want to meet you where you are. And so each of those practices are really meant to be meeting you where you are. There's also accompanying music playlists, there's journal prompts. So it's very much an interactive book. And so what has come from that is a membership. So within the membership, you have access to all of the practices. And the exciting part of the membership that is different from an app that is, what you would expect from an on-demand platform. This has the invitation for the social connection. So I traveled through all five blue zones this year, and one of the key pillars of longevity is that we're in movement and in connection. And these are the big epidemics in our culture, is the sedentary and the loneliness. And so really wanting to shapeshift the way that we're in the in-between, not only the in-between moments of, like I have this gap between appointments, but also, like, I feel like we're always in transition, whether we're in this next evolution of uh relationship status or work status, or one of our loved ones have just passed away, or there's been like a lot of grief this year in different capacities. And so, like, really wanting to have a space where it's so tempting to just cocoon in and withdraw, and the hope is that we can feel safe enough that we can connect with one another. And going back to what we were saying, if it's on the phone or if it's on Zoom, like using the technology to actually connect or feeling inspired to, you know what, like come over and we'll do this meditation together or we'll stretch together and then, we can share a tea and talk about how that resonates for each of us. And so that membership is called Shine, and there's a free trial of 7 days. Would love for you to come in and try it out. And there's also information about retreats that I have going on. I'll be going to Italy next year, and there's a lot going on. But also, it's all good. I never say busy. I say full. I really love all of the offerings, and it's such a joy to connect in all the ways. And so please feel free to reach out. I'd love to be in these conversations in different ways.
Well, lovely. That's really cool. And I love this notion of fullness instead of busyness. That's great. Yeah, yeah. So with that, leave the audience. May we all find our most optimal space for ourselves, for each other, and for all beings everywhere. May all beings everywhere realize awakening and be free.